Welcome to the PR Maven podcast. And in this episode, I'm speaking with Sean Comerford. Sean Comerford is a writer and Pulitzer Prize nominated former international journalist who worked in Chicago, New York, Budapest, and Moscow. He has bicycled across country 3 times and hitchhiked across America, Europe, the Middle East, and North America. He's ridden freight trains and rounded up cattle out west, studied Buddhism in the Himalayas, and won a heavyweight boxing championship in Ireland. He toured almost 100 countries, swam the headwaters of the Nile, fought off a hippo attack, and toured ecological disaster areas in the Amazon. Comerford's bylines have appeared in the Huffington Post, New York Daily News, Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times, Daily Herald, Copley News Service, Budapest Sun, Budapest Business Journal, and the Moscow Times. He lives in the Chicago area to be near his daughter, Grace. He's promised her that he'll stay closer to home for a while. Welcome to the PR Maven podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I've been strengthening brands through PR for over 35 years, and now I'm celebrating the success of executives, influencers, business owners, and entrepreneurs from all around the world, all of whom have cultivated their brands and broadened their networks through traditional and digital networking methods. Each week, I interview one of these interesting and influential individuals and provide an opportunity for you, the PR Maven Nation, to gain insights from their strategies and stories. So stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening. So, Michael, you've traveled to carnivals around the country. What drew you to follow the carnivals and hitchhike from one to another?
Well, honestly, what happened was I was a journalist for about almost 40 years, 30 years. I came to a point in my life where the journalism jobs were drying up and I was looking for another direction, and I decided to write books. And it came to me that carnival people seemed to me, I worked in a carnival years ago when I was 23. I saw these carnival people. I thought they were great traveling secrets, very good stories out on the road. And so I thought, well, for my first book, I'll try to capture some of these stories. It'll be a real storytelling year. And I had because of my journalism background, I wanted to cover some issues also. So the original idea was to work in one carnival for the entire year, start in the Silicon Valley, and cover a big issue in America right now. And we can see maybe it playing out in the election, which is income inequality. And so I thought, well, the Silicon Chasm, this valley has more billionaires than anywhere else in America, and it has among the poorest in America, most homeless per person. So I said, great carnival stories and an income inequality story to tell. And the book turned out nothing like that. I ended up going to 10 carnivals in 10 states, hitchhiking between those carnival events, becoming the #1 hitchhiker in America, but also covering a variety of other social issues, including Mexican immigration, the American caste system, the working poor, and others. And eventually, because of COVID, the lack of communal joy that we're all missing with the closure of state fairs and festivals, and that aggravates our mental health crisis in America. So it became a much bigger story. But from your original question, why did I go out? I saw great stories to tell. I wanted to tell them. And I thought this was an interesting way to view America, was from the floorboard of a Ferris wheel.
Well, there's so much that you've said that I would love to unpack. One thing I'm curious about is how did you become the number one hitchhiker in America? And that was according to whom?
Well, I used my investigative skills from 30 years of journalism, and but I added up the mileage, and it was 14,000 miles from Alaska to Florida and Mexico, from California to New York. And I went to all the hitchhiking sites and polled them, and they're common hitchhiking sites. And I did a poll. And including of all the people I met on the road, I asked them as I was going along, do you know anyone who sticks strictly to North America? I mean, there's others that hitchhike around the world, and I have done that. But in 1 year in North America alone, and I came up the winner, and I'm sticking to it. It's an unscientific poll in the end, but it was very complete. I went to all the websites, and no one could match me.
Well, I think it's awesome. And if I could do that, I would. I mean,
oh, no.
I think you and I share.
That would be wild if I had met Nancy out on the road and now we're talking on a podcast years later.
You and I share something that we probably didn't know we shared because we actually haven't met each other in person. But I think you're intensely curious about other people, as am I.
Absolutely. And that was one of the main themes, and that was to bust up those stereotypes that we have of carnies and carnival people. They are, mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers. They're families. I call them great skeins of families out on the road. And, there are some pirates, and people living on the edge. And then there are others that are generations of carnival people working very, very hard. And their main job is bringing joy to other people's lives. And that's why I think during this COVID crisis, they should be considered essential workers, because without that communal joy, we're seeing the after effects, which are almost invisible compared to the amount of deaths that we have. But it's a real impact. And I looked it up here in Maine that there were 26 agricultural fairs that were canceled, including both your state fairs. And that has an effect and on people's joy. And you actually have the oldest state fair in all the country.
The Freiburg Fair?
No.
Skowhegan.
Yes,
Skowhegan State Fair.
Skowhegan Fair. It's the oldest one in the whole country. So there's a real state fair story to be told there. I worked in many. I worked in state fairs and festivals in California, New York, New Jersey, Chicago, Alaska, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. And in Florida, I was in a freak show, but they didn't let me on stage because they didn't see the inner freak in me, Nancy.
Yeah, I probably have an inner freak also, but I try not to let it out too often. It's not compatible with being a PR professional.
You're scaring me now.
Oh, my gosh. Well, it sounds like you have really traveled widely and dug into the inner fabric of culture, which I love. And that ties into my next question, which is about stories or tall tales from carnivals. What are some of your favorites that you have uncovered?
Well, they were people, and part of it is to not make them into stereotypes. But I met so many different kinds of people on the road, and wouldn't you know it, I was supposed to have it right in front of me. There it is. All right. So here's some of the ones that I'd like to mention. One is I met I called her Kathy the Fish Lady, but the Fish Lady in San Francisco in Oakland. She said the reason that she was doing all that she did, which was run a kiddie joint, which is the name for a game. The reason she did all that was for the kids. And she said, I never had any children, but I do this for the kids. And if they don't win, I cheat for them. I make them win. And she says, you'll find that throughout the carnival here, especially among the jointies, which are the game people. They have their own lingo in carnivals, and a jointee is a game person, and a ride jockey is a person who runs the rides. And I was both. I ran rides and I ran games, and so I could make your day or break your heart. But so I found her motivation was actually sort of common, that she wanted kids to be happy. And one of the stranger guys I met was a guy I called the Tub Thug. And he traveled with me through the state fairs of Minnesota, Oklahoma, and Texas. And in Texas, one day we were sitting around talking, and I said, Tub Thug, what makes you, who you are? And he goes, well, of course I'm a pimp. He was a pimp. And he was running girls in every town that we were in from the carnival. And he says, well, here in Dallas, I have a few girls, and I'm afraid that, I love pimping because I'm the best at it. I'm Sir Dre, the greatest pimp in Dallas. And I go, holy crap.
Well, he's confident like you are as the number one hitchhiker.
Right. Yeah, he didn't do a scientific poll either. And so he said, what are you the best at, Mike? And I go, well, nothing. And he goes, he says, but I want to change my life. And as the world's greatest pimp, right? He said the thing that he wanted most in life was one good woman. He said, if I could find one good woman, I'd change everything. I'd get a CDL. I'd be a truck driver, and I'd come home every weekend, and I'd have a family and one good woman. Is that so wrong, Mike? And I'm going, I know you're pulling my leg, but no. But it struck me that he found carnival life easy, the pimpin' life he was excelling at, and the life of having a home and a family was the Mount Everest to him. And I thought, wow, now this guy is sort of interesting, even if he is sort of playing me, because I just never thought of it. I mean, when you're living on the edge of society, the center of society looks like a long way away, almost unattainable. I also met Ward Hall, who was the last king of the sideshows. And he was in his 80s when I met him. He's since passed away last summer, but he had performed in, I forget, dozens and dozens of TV shows and been in cameos in movies. He had performed at the Kennedy Center, at the Met, and at Radio City Music Hall. And he had written plays, and he and of course there were biographies about him and everything. And he had run freak shows all his life. And so he'd worked with pinheads and the claw boy, the lobster boy, bearded ladies, half men. And I interviewed the half man, Shorty Dangerously, who talked about they cut off his legs when he was born because of the birth defect he had. So he was called the half man, and he would walk around on his hands at the freak show. And I asked him, well, what is it like living your life? And he said, well, I can tell you one thing. It's been way better since I became a freak. He says, now I travel the world. I have fans on the internet. I'm loved and adored. And he goes, my life would never have been as rich as if, without this freak show. And so I go, well, if life isn't all about perspective, I started seeing life through his eyes and life through that pimp's eyes and life through Ward Hall's eyes and life from a working poor whose lives would be upturned if you just drop your cell phone. How are you going to afford another one? You're broke by midweek. The pay is so low. So, and yet you're working constantly. So it was a real exercise in bending the lens.
Well, I can tell that you're a great interviewer, and that's probably why you're a great storyteller, because I think you have the ability, I think it's called empathy, actually, to put yourself in another person's shoes and see life through their eyes. So I'm sure that your book is really fascinating, and I definitely will plan to read it as soon as you send me a copy.
I will. And then I want to read your views on it.
Okay.
Because I definitely do. And but when you were talking about storytelling before the show started, and that's something I learned here. I mean, I was a journalist and a storyteller. I went to college in Ireland, for God's sake, and I named my dad's boat Seanachie, which is Gaelic for storyteller. And I am fascinated with storytelling. But in writing this book, I realized once again how much in your profession, public relations, and in marketing, it's not just the story you mean to go out and tell. It's the story you start refining and retelling, changing with the retelling and with the changing circumstances. My book wasn't about COVID. I did this book before COVID, before the COVID outbreak. But when I was writing it, boy, COVID became part of it toward the end. And I started out to write one book. I ended up writing another. And I think that's the way all businesses go, is that you refine your storytelling as you go along. And but be aware that life is a story, and we're storytelling apes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's been suggested. I point this out in the book that Homo sapiens in Latin means wise man, but maybe we don't so much answer to that as pan-neurans, which means storytelling apes. And we are storytellers. And when you think about it, even math and science is storytelling. And almost everything we do in life is stringing together connections and stories.
Well, I talk a lot about the story brand or your brand manifesto, whether it's your personal brand manifesto or the brand manifesto of your company or organization. And one of the purposes of having a story like that is arming your raving fans or your brand ambassadors with a story that they can tell to other people. So when people are enthusiastic about your brand, they have a story that you've actually seeded in their minds, and then they can actually share it with others. There's a book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. That's kind of the Bible now of storytelling for brands or personal branding, which is one of my favorite topics, actually. But actually, one of your favorite topics is green living or living green. So can you tell us about your Living Green books?
So as I said earlier, in the transition from being a journalist to writing books, I have to have another book in mind. And this was immersion journalism that kind of transformed into something more because I became part of the story as the year went on. But so I need to write more books, and I don't know that I can live on writing immersion books year to year. Plus, it separates me from my daughter, who's growing up now, and she's 15. But so I decided, well, let's create a self-publishing business that is rapid release. And so I had to examine myself. What are you passionate about? And I think one of the things I'm very passionate about is climate change. And so I thought, well, in the future, the coming year, shortly, I think in January and February, I'll start writing and releasing books on climate change and nonfiction being how to live green. And then some fiction, which is I'm testing out. I'm marketing the idea now, but I have an idea for a Greenie McGeehee series where it's a young girl about 15, about my daughter's age, and her father and her good friends sailing around the world as they're being global activists and solving murders. So it's part thriller, part cli-fi, which is climate fiction. And so it would be a bit of Nancy Drew on a sailboat sort of idea. And we'll see how that goes. I actually wrote one of those already. And I want to see how that goes, see how if I can launch any kind of fiction fast fiction business, and then with some educational books on climate change.
Well, it sounds like you have no shortage of ideas. I love that. I bet the inside of your mind is a busy place.
Well, yes, and the idea is focus, and you have to have some focus. And right now, I'm narrating the book, so that's a whole new thing. I mean, this is all a matter of, I don't know how many of your listeners are older, but I did this transition when I was 54. I'm now 61, and so I'm transforming my career and life, and I'm now narrating a book, which is a whole different group of skills. And then I'll be starting to rapid release books, which is a whole different set of skills, and learning how to self-publish. I now know how to do that. And so it's a reinvention of myself as well.
Well, I've gone through a similar process in my life and career because I have self-published 2 books, actually. One in 2015 called PR Works, and then one just recently, actually during COVID, called Grow Your Audience, Grow Your Brand. And I actually also recorded both of those books. So I think it's really amazing that we're able to do this. And
Oh, absolutely. And it's part of what you mentioned earlier also. It's living your dream. I mean, find what you're passionate about. And if you're going toward that, failure is less humiliating than failing at something you didn't want to do anyway, or even succeeding mildly at something you didn't want to do anyway. Following your passion is fun. Right now, it's fun for me. I'm right at the beginning of it, and I might be in for a failure. But right now, the book is getting incredible reviews. It's been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize and for a Lucas Award. So serious journalism and writing awards. And it's been a great pleasure to live the life that I did and to write about it. So do you want to hear a bally, Nancy? Yeah. I'm getting off subject a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
A bally is for marketers out there in carnivals is what they use to draw the crowd in. So a good man who you call it a talker, a good talker will have a great bally. And here's my bally for American Oz. And remember, I went all over the country. So here it goes. From Alaska to Mexico, New York to Cali, from Dallas to Chi-Town, hear my bally. Change your life. It's meant to be. Win big money. Free, free, free. Be shocked to be amazed. On every page. Be younger, be smarter. In a tech age. Say no to the square life. Say no to the blahs. Say yes to the wonders of American Oz.
Wow. Standing ovation. I love that bally. I had never even heard that term before.
And so what I did also on the year, I told stories in a variety of manners. I had a blog while I was living on the road. I wrote magazine pieces while I was living on the road. I took videos while I was living on the road. None of the carnival people knew I was writing about them. And that became an issue at the beginning of the book. I got fired immediately from a carnival. They said, nobody's going to hire a writer. And I agreed. So I decided I'm going to go around to a lot of carnivals and I'm not going to tell anyone what I'm doing. And I told stories in every possible way I could. And so now when I'm narrating my book, I also have incorporated singing and breaking the third wall a couple times. So it's every kind of storytelling you can. And it was a great adventure. I was going to sing you a song, but now I don't think I will.
Ah, well, maybe in the second half of our interview.
I'll tell you this, that on my hitchhiking, what separated me from other hitchhikers was that I sing on the side of the road. When no one's coming, it's really low. And when no one's there, it gets louder. So I start off like, this land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land is made for you and me. As I was walking down that ribbon of a highway, I saw above me the endless skyway. I saw below me the golden valley. This land was made for you and me.
Yeah. That is the first time. That's the first time anybody has sang on my podcast. I love it.
One of the things about it is the book is that it's so full of joy, and it is so full of that kind of magnificent panorama of America. From Alaska, where I had Eskimo carnivals working with me, to New York, where the guys were from the Bronx, and Chicago, and the Silicon Valley, where the carnies are from the Silicon Valley. And I went down to Mexico to see the new face of the American carnival, which is Mexican. And I went down to a little town that empties out of men every year. It's a ghost town of men anyway, for 9 months. And they go north and they work in the carnivals. And I went down there to see them. And so I saw much of Mexico, too, in there. And the grand panorama of America, the greatness of it, the variety of people in it, is all part of what American Oz is all about.
Well, Michael, you're a wonderful guest. Thank you so much. We're going to take a short break now and come back with more from Michael Sean Comerford. And this interview has turned into way more than I ever would have anticipated from someone who I thought was, quote unquote, just an author. But you are so much more, Michael. Thank you so much. And we'll be back with more from Michael Sean Comerford.
Do you want to grow your client or customer base? Perhaps increase brand awareness? Maybe tell your unique story more effectively? Of course you do. But you may be worried that you don't have enough expertise to make that happen. Well, no worries, PR Maven Nation. Let the PR Maven herself, Nancy Marshall, show you how easy it is to get your message across effectively using a powerful yet simple tool, a message map. Nancy's training is often called informative and constructive, well-designed and impactful, with a perfect blend of theory and real-life experience. You will leverage Nancy's expertise to create your own message map when you register for this comprehensive online video training course, which is broken down into 4 easy-to-understand modules. Normally, this course is priced at $147, but for listeners of the PR Maven podcast, that's you, PR Maven Nation, it's only $29 when you enter the code word podcast during enrollment. It even includes a workbook and bonus content to guide you through the process. So go to prmaven.com and click on the Message Map Mastery course to enroll today. Remember, enter the word podcast during enrollment for a special discounted price of $29.
Welcome back, and today we're talking and singing with Michael Sean Comerford, who's a book author and publisher at Comerford Publishing, LLC. And I want to dive right back in with more questions. Michael, I want to talk to you about storytelling as it relates to your personal brand, as well as the brand of the subjects of your stories. One of the big things about having a personal brand is being memorable, and you certainly have proven to me already that you are a memorable person. So how does storytelling help with personal branding?
Well, for all the reasons that you said also, and on my book, American Oz, I made sure that the author section included the most unusual things I've done in my life, and not just the universities I went to. So it had a mixed. I've had mixed results with that, because I did try to make myself a bit of a character on the back, so that you can imagine the personal growth and the arc of my story through the fact that you can see the author and you know a little bit about him because of the author bio. But I had one reviewer say, "Well, this is an adventurist, and his adventure was about carnivals." And And that was way too simplistic of a way to read it. But so the story, you can't control the way it goes. That's another thing about having, I don't know if you found that in writing your books, but so many people are finding so many different things in my book than I thought they would. And so I have to adjust that. But I'm very aware, especially since it came out, that I am part of the story, that people are going to read it thinking about me, the person telling the story, and whether they like me or not is part of it.
Well, I think the fact that you are so authentic and actually forthcoming about your personality makes you very likable and interesting, and as I said, memorable. And I think some people they hesitate to really tell their own personal story. They might say, "Oh, I am a lawyer," but they don't expand upon what makes them unique as a lawyer, or I'm an accountant.
That prompted me. I did see a publicist about my book, and she said, "Well, the first thing I'm going to do is not make this book about carnivals." And I go, "Well, it's not really about traveling carnivals or state fairs and festivals. It's really about all these other things." And she goes, "No, it's going to be about you. If you hire me as your publicist, it's going to be a personality-driven thing." I couldn't afford to hire her, so, but I'm very aware of that. And also, I got to say that the power of storytelling even worked in the carnivals when I was there, because I told you about the bally, and some, carnival workers do have a great bally and great pitches to get people to come and play their game or come to their ride. And I almost immediately started doing that. And in California, I had a ride that went up. It was a swing ride, and I stood back and I would hit the button, and it would take like 5-10 seconds before the swing ride would kick in. So I hit the button and I'd walk out into the middle of the swing ride where everyone was sitting on a swing ready to go up. And I'd raise my arms up like Moses and then say, "Up, up, up." And then all of a sudden the ride would go up in the air. And then I'd say, "And away." And then all of a sudden it would be swinging around like crazy, and wide swoops, and kids would come back and say, "How do you do that, mister? How do you do that?" And parents were coming back saying, "You got to see this guy." And carnies that I talked to later said, "I've been in carnies all my life, and I've never seen a guy with more energy." Well, I made sure that wherever I went, whatever I did for the carnivals the rest of the year, I had the most energy, and I had a story to tell everywhere. And at the State Fair of Texas, I had a tub game, which is it's like a laundry basket at a angle, and then you throw a softball into it, and if you get 2 in a row that stay in there, then you win. And I would tell people, "All right." And by the way, no one told me to do this. They just said, "Mike, go, run the tubs." And so the first person I met, I said, "All right, I'm going to hypnotize you." And the person goes, it was a young woman, "No, you're not." And I said, "Yes, I am. I'm going to hypnotize you with Mike's Rainbow." And she goes, "Mike's Rainbow? What's that?" And I said, "Well, throw that softball to me in a high arc, like a rainbow, Mike's Rainbow. And now throw that same arc into that bucket and you'll make it. You'll win." And sure enough, it would work. And they would go, "It's Mike's Rainbow. I've been hypnotized." It's all a story that I use to get people to play and to play and play again.
Well, when we took a break, I was telling you that I just finished reading the book by Jay Shetty called Think Like a Monk. And one of the things he talks about is discovering your dharma, which is sort of your raison d'etre. It's the reason that you were born. And I feel like I have found that. I feel lucky that I discovered my career early on because I feel like it was the thing I was born to do. And I feel like this is what you're born to do too, is not only storytelling, but living the stories. I mean, you don't just observe from afar. You got right in there in that carnival and you were a showman, just like P.T. Barnum.
Yeah, I mean, I studied Barnum afterwards when I was writing the book, and yeah, he was. It added everything. It added so much just knowing, having seen freak shows and so forth, and ballets and so forth, and you're talking about the monk Dharma. I told you earlier that I also studied Buddhism in the Himalayas, and I'm aware of all that. And it's not easy finding what you want to do and matching it with your ability. When those things match up, it's a great feeling. And I can hear it in your voice. You have. I'm still at the beginning of my journey. I could still fall flat on my face, but so far, so good.
I feel really sorry for people who have like those countdown clocks. I have a client, and I'm not going to say who it is, but he has this clock that counts down the number of seconds until he can retire. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's so sad because he still has about 10 more years. So it's like life is too short to spend all that time doing something that you know doesn't give you joy.
I had the president of my high school class heard about my story, and he said, Mike, I want to write about you for the high school. And he St. Viator's outside of Chicago, and I said, okay, fine. And then we interviewed, and it was a good interview. And at the end of it, he says, do you have any advice to high school kids today? And I said, live life now.
Yeah.
Don't wait for retirement or for when you're older and you can do other things. You're already alive, and look for all the great ways that you can be alive now. And it's words to live by, honestly.
Absolutely. And if you're doing what you love, you're going to be better at doing it. And as you said, you will have more energy and enthusiasm and excitement and all of those things.
That could a whole different power source.
Exactly. So I want to ask you about your hitchhiking because, a lot of people are nervous about hitchhiking. Were you ever in an unsafe situation when you were out there on the road?
Well, I had one situation where I was hitchhiking up by Pink Mountain. I believe it's in Alberta, Canada. And it was hours on the road. Finally, this beat up old car came along, and this guy with cobalt blue eyes and a big shaggy beard. And he looked just like out of central casting for an old prospector, kind of a crazy laugh. And he says, get in. And so I get in, and he drives me down the road, and I go, well, I'm in the year of carnivals, but they don't know I'm writing about them. But I tell all the drivers that I'm telling that I'm writing about them, and he says, oh, and then he drives off the road, the Alaskan highway, and I go, well, what? And he goes right into the forest, and I looked at him, and I looked in the forest, and I go, whoa, nice day to die. And what he did was he brought me to his house, which was a yellow bus. He was a hermit. He lived in a bus in the middle of the woods, and he had a dog and a cat and a young wife, actually. So it wasn't 100% a hermit. And he was in his 60s. He had a wife in her 20s, and he killed everything that he ate, and he lived completely off the grid. And he told me about his whole life. And at the end, he says, Mike, writers don't make much money. You ought to, whatever you make off of this book, put it into a yellow bus and live out off the grid like I am. And you can write as many books as you want. And he says, this is the life to live. And I go, wow. No, I was never threatened by anybody. In fact, I hitchhiked naked, I call it, because that is hitchhiking without a weapon for self protection. Everyone I met was a good Samaritan. And let's see here. Who picked me up? Inventors, lawyers, truckers, families, grandmas, grandpas, rich people, poor people, whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, and a lepidopterist, which is a butterfly expert. Magicians, authors, preachers, bloggers, criminals, and maybe even saints in disguise.
It's so funny. You don't know this, but I'm sitting here taking notes, and that lepidopterist, I'm probably going to have to look up the spelling on that one, but that's a great word.
Yeah, well, that's right for your note taking. This lepidopterist was a Princeton PhD candidate. He was just down in the dismal swamp with a nets and looking to catch butterflies and to study the climate change on their physiology. And it struck me that how connected all of this world is. And that was one of the themes here, too, was that we're all connected in more ways than we know. And the butterfly lepidopterist kind of made me see that right down to the butterflies, everything is connected.
I agree, absolutely. And, we might have our differences as human beings, but I always remind myself that, every human has a head and a heart, and the key is to find a way to connect with those people. And it's a very good point you're making too, that even the butterflies are part of the World Wide Web, so to speak. Not the internet, but the web of living things on this planet.
Absolutely, and it's a beautiful way to look at it too. But at one point in Alberta, hitchhiking, I also write that in one point in the book, I also write that in the right truck and in the right car, the greatest show on earth is hitchhiking. And one time I was hitchhiking up in Canada and I was surrounded by butterflies, or what they call a kaleidoscope. A big group of butterflies surrounded me on a remote highway. And I just couldn't believe it. I was in a snow dome of butterflies, and I saw so much beauty on the road. And I listened to those hitchhiking people. Some of the stories were told to me that were not told to their best friend. Some of those stories were heartbreaking. Some of them were incredibly revealing. It was like a confessional. And the greatest stories I heard all year, some of them were in those cars, listening to people tell. One guy told a ghost story, and one guy told a story about his own birth and the Navajo Nation, an Indian kind of myth that he believed about his birth. And just so many interesting people. And they were all good Samaritans trying to help another soul. I had some grifters pick me up outside of Amarillo on my way to through Arkansas up to through Oklahoma on the way to Arkansas, and those guys were drinking beer and smoking pot and on the way up and listening to the Grateful Dead, and that might have been a little unsafe, but they were harmless, other than the fact that they were, high as kites when they were driving me through the night.
That would make me a little nervous. So what would you say to others who are stuck in jobs that they don't like about doing something like what you're doing and living the life of their dreams?
I'm kind of known in the Chicago area in journalism, and the internet, the social media kind of lit up when they heard I was hitchhiking between these carnivals, and there was envy. And there were guys saying, you got to envy a guy like that. How free is that guy? He's so free. And, really hitchhiking is free. It is a practice of freedom if it's done right. But a lot of it's done simply because you're too poor to do it any other kind of way, And
or that you've lost your license from an OUI.
Yeah, right. You lost your license and you're hitchhiking and you're humiliated. Well, I didn't. I thought of it as I am really, I've always wanted to write a book. This is the time I can start writing books. I've developed the skill of writing that over the years in journalism, I can do it. I think I know what might sell, and I kind of try to combine all those things together and went on an adventure, which is liberating. It really got me outside of the workaday world. And I can see why some people mistook it for freedom, but it wasn't freedom. It was a job. It was pursuing something I thought could make me some money and produce something I wanted to do. But it was unconventional thinking, thinking outside the box. And I think that's what you're getting at.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I admire you for that. Because again, so many people are just stuck in a rut and doing jobs that they don't necessarily like, but it pays the bills and it's paying for their retirement eventually, and they're just counting down the days. So I don't think that's the way to live.
Well, not day to day, and that's what I told the high schoolers. I told them to start early, live in life now. Don't worry. Don't put it off until you're out of college or until you're married or until you're retired or, all the landmarks in life. Start living and realize it's right now.
I think it's important to pay attention as you go through your days to what gives you joy and then figure out a way to make a living out of that. So to notice the kinds of things that fulfill you and as I said, make you feel joyful.
Well, Nancy,
and obviously,
you're the kind of person I wanted to pick me up when I was hitchhiking.
I probably would not have because I've been trained not to pick up hitchhikers.
There's a public radio announcer in Northwest Indiana, Mike Puente. He says, "Hey, Mike, I heard you were hitchhiking through Gary and you didn't even give me a call. You didn't even let me come by and pick you up." And I said, "I know you, man. I'll bet you were driving right past me, giving me the finger and laughing as you were going past." I said, but most people are too scared to do that. And it does take a kind of special kind of person to pick up a hitchhiker. But it, like I said earlier, with my list of all the kinds of people that pick me up, I had grandmothers pick me up, dads with their young babies with them.
Did you use a sign or did you just have your thumb out?
I had a sign. Mm-hmm. I had a sign, and some hitchhikers like to write funny things on their signs, but I always figured people are going by too fast to read a whole funny sign and then decide to stop. But I just wrote where I was going, and it was a thrill for me the first time I wrote Alaska down on a sign. I was in Butte, Montana, and I wrote down Alaska. I go, wow, this is fun. It's 4,000 miles from Chicago to Alaska. And it's only 3,000 miles, LA to New York. So there's some real territory there. That's
a long way. Exactly. Where did you sleep, by the way?
Oh, that's when you mentioned hitchhiking. I'm sorry I didn't mention that. That's the scariest part of hitchhiking was finding a place to sleep. And then I didn't find a place to sleep. A lot of places I went, if I could, I found an all-night diner and I would write my notes up from the day and I would stay there all night, or all-night Denny's. One of my reviews says, "This is a masterpiece written from Denny's." But
would you actually fall asleep in these diners or at Denny's?
I would sometimes do that, but that wasn't scary. Those were just hard to find. I mean, once you found them, you're pretty golden unless they kick you out. But
So sure enough, we lost Michael Sean Comerford somehow. He must be on to his next adventure. But you can check out more about Michael at michaelseancomerford.com. And that's Michael, Sean, which is Sean, Comerford, Comerford.com. And he also has a Twitter at Mike Comerford. So check him out. And I want to thank Mike Comerford for what I thought was a really great interview. And I hope you liked it too, PR Maven Nation. And I hope you have a great day full of adventure and doing the things that bring you joy. That's it for this week's episode. I'd like to thank you for listening, and if you feel that you've gotten value out of today's conversation, consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever app you're using to tune in. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should do so. I release a new episode each week, and subscribing will make sure you get an alert when there's a new episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation by going to prmaven.com/nation and clicking join. It's free, and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you have an Alexa-enabled device, be sure to add the PR Maven Marketing Minute to your daily flash briefing menu. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.